is talking about these tools as kind of a Lego set.
What I really love about it is the visual simplicity to it. Obviously, it's very complex.
Many processes don't need to be real time that way, but conversational interactions with AIs and applications in your company will want to be very immediate.
You kind of have to identify at which level that you need to implement. All right. So this is all related to operations.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Today is June 27th, 2024, and you're watching the Daily AI Show live. And today we are talking all about model orchestration. And is it really the key to AI application development? And with us today, we have Jyunmi, Andy, Beth, and I'm Brian. I will tell you we're having some issues going live to LinkedIn. So anybody that's hanging out there in YouTube land, looks like Jen, heck yeah, morning crew. Okay, so I just want to make sure that we're reaching out to our YouTube folks. It looks like Jen is seeing us, which is great. Okay, so I'm just making sure we got some technical issues on the backside as we deal with StreamYard a little bit there. So let's talk about model orchestration. Now, I'm going to pretty quickly turn this over to Andy, but just to get us set up with a brief definition, model orchestration is really, it's like the process of coordinating and managing. It could be multiple AI models. It could be evaluations, different tests, workflows, different streams you have going on. It's really like, it's like orchestration. And so there's a lot of visuals out there. We know that there's tools like Respell, as well as several others that have taken the stance of sort of putting it up like Make would on Make, meaning like Zapier, but Make, where it puts it up on the screen and kind of gives you a visual overview to it. And that's what I sort of think about is this orchestration is literally a conductor there going, okay, we have an app to create here. And Andy, you can get more technical on this, but how I see it is we have an app in a development, and there's many moving pieces from the different models that we might be wanting to use in different parts of this orchestration or flow. We might want to be doing evaluations along the way. We might want to be doing all sorts of different types of prompt engineering and testing on the back end. And so who's going to be the conductor? How are we going to orchestrate and organize this whole thing? So Andy, I'll hand it over to you. And by all means, if you're like, wrong, you can take it. That's where I said.
That was a perfectly consistent introduction with exactly what I'm going to say. And you're asking the question, who does that? Well, I'm going to share with you a list of the companies that have offered products that fill this role. And that role is called AI engineering in the emerging system stack for AI. So we talk a lot on this show about infrastructure. That's the chips and data centers that drive these things, and model development, the frontier models that actually generate the responses for your queries and for the applications that are being developed. And that's the part we're talking about now is application development. And it's a little bit more, right? It's a little bit more than just a chatbot interface to craft, in order to craft automations and deliver the intelligence behind these very great LLMs. There's a bunch of different other pieces and parts to that process. And I'm going to describe those. Then I'm going to show you some of the, I'm literally going to show you one that I think is at the head of the pack when it comes to this orchestration layer. So first of all, for an application to be developed, you have to have a front end. We've all leaned on OpenAI's front end, which is you go to chat.openai.com, and that you're not directly at the model. You're on their application that lets you access their various models. You can select the models there. Now, that's a very simple chat interface to their model. But in company applications, where you're going to include automations and different interactions with other systems that you already have, that application needs a front end. And then also that's going to be custom built for your specific target function or audience. And then that front end is going to serve to receive inputs from your company systems and or their users, and it's going to present the outputs on different devices, mobile apps, browsers, in Slack, and in those various user interfaces where the responses are being delivered, even to the back end, like responses to your back end systems for AI applications. You can see streaming and multimedia outputs all neatly assembled connected correctly and reliably delivering the output from the LLM models. All right. So these middlewares, these things that are being designed and delivered to develop an AI engineering framework are platforms on which you both develop and produce a working application. Many of them are built around retrieval-augmented generation, which requires, that's required in order to get into the model through that middleware, get the specific company information or specific knowledge that you've set up for that application, get it into the model at the time of inference in order to get the right responses. So, but there are other monitoring tools that you mentioned, Brian. So there's evaluations of prompts, there's prompt engineering interfaces, and then there's this workflow management thing. So this emerging role in this orchestration middleware layer is generally possessed of the following characteristics, right? It integrates with multiple LLM providers, not just one. Like OpenAI, when you go to their chat interface, that's an application that interfaces with just one model provider. But these systems integrate with all of them, or not all of them, but most of the important ones at least. Okay, and they provide RAG, or retrieval-augmented generation capabilities. It means they provide a database that is vectorized and has embedding, processes that you can put your data into it. It has these workflow automations. You'll get a nice graphic image of that when I share my screen. And then it has production deployment management and monitoring of AI applications. So those are the key features. You mentioned one of them, Respell, and Respell is an example of this kind of middleware. We're all familiar with it because it's an easy interface to work with. But even before Respell added the access to multiple LLMs and the workflow management that's drag and drop, there were other automation systems, Zapier and Make, that have many of the features of these more comprehensive development and production environments like Respell. Cassidy is another one. Buildship is one that Jyunmi and I have been working with recently that it offers many of these same features. I'm going to feature one called Vellum, which is, I've been watching these guys from very, very early in 2023, and they came out of Y Combinator, and they've really moved, I think, to the head of the pack. So I have a bias there compared to the other ones, in part because I have a long-term familiarity with what they're doing, and I've even spoken to the CEO of this company on a number of occasions, to try to understand how it could be used to work with, application ideas that I've had. So I'm going to share my screen now. Here is Vellum. Build AI systems you can trust. And I'm going to go over here and navigate around for you. Okay, here's an example of some of the major companies that have developed and deployed applications using the Vellum platform. And this is an image of a workflow. And they have actually built in here, if you go to Vellum.ai, which is what we're looking at right now, you can just click on preview workflow and play with one. So you're actually using the back end of their system. It's backed by top VCs. It came out of Y Combinator. But look at this. The founders of HubSpot, Reddit, Dropbox, Cruise, and Instacart are all investors in Vellum. Okay, so those are the credentials.
Before you move on from the, real quick, Andy, right before you move on from the workflow there, can I just tell you from some of the cool things, I say this a lot from working previously in business intelligence, is that there's a lot of overlap from business intelligence from 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago into AI today. And as soon as I see this, it reminds me exactly of what the back end of a tool like ClickSense, which is a business intelligence tool, and really what it's showing you in a really neat visual way. In ClickSense, it was like connecting synthetic keys between databases. But the nice part about that is if you're used to seeing that, Vellum and these other tools are being very smart, and I am sure very intentional in making sure that it has a similar look, a similar flow. This may not be databases, but you can imagine if these were all individual spreadsheets and they were connected by synthetic keys and we were connecting that data together to de-silo it, it would look very similar to this. So I just wanted to bring that up for anybody who's sort of played in the BI space for years, like I did, this is like music to my ears because it looks exactly like what I would hope it would look like. So it's kind of cool. And by the way, not just Vellum, others do it too, but this is a good example.
So let's just scroll down here a little bit, and I just talk a moment about all the use cases. I mean, this normally scrolls and it goes on, but you'll recognize many of these as very typical things that you might do in a corporate application or want to do. And you can set up a routine that is generating these in response to triggers that happen in your company systems. And so that's the use case kind of thing. And they're advertising this as a complete platform for production LLM apps. And they have primarily a focus on enterprise and on, small to medium businesses as well. So let me now just jump over to the actual Vellum UI. And I'm starting here at prompts, not at workflows, because I think this is what really intrigued me at the outset, which is when you're developing a structured prompt and you're wanting to make sure that it works the way it should, there's a process that you have to go through of experimentation and testing of those things. And Vellum gives you this way of doing it in a really clear side-by-side multi-model way. So this is kind of dense, but it's gonna snap into focus for you when I show you how it works. So I have a prompt that's going to guide an LLM. I can pick the LLM down here. It's going to guide the LLM to produce an output, and then in my workflow management, I can take that output and insert it into some other step in the workflow process. But now I want to make sure I'm using the right model and that I've tuned this prompt so it gets the proper result. Well, what I did here is I wrote this structured prompt, and then I ran it, and I said, okay, well, I want to test this side by side against another model. So here you see I have GPT-4 Turbo and I have Claude 3 Opus. All I had to do here to create a new variant, as it's called, is I clone this thing. I click up here, I say clone it, and it creates a new variant that's exactly the same, but then I go down here and I select a different model. Look at all the models that you can select. Okay, look, I've got all the OpenAI, Anthropic, Google models, Mosaic, Meta models, OpenChat, Cohere, Mistral is also in there somewhere. All the models, many, many models to choose from, and including, for example, Claude 3.5 Sonnet that's in there already. Okay, so it's always up to date. You can, let's suppose I have this set of prompts in production. Well, I'm going to cancel this request to change those models. If it's in production, and I say, okay, well, Claude 3.5 Sonnet just came out. I wonder if it'll do a better job with this prompt than the one that I'm already using, because it's 1/5 the cost of what I'm using right here. I'm going to reduce the cost of my production by using that model. Let's test it. So I just change the selection, and then I run it. And here I have I've used some variables. So I have a topic for this generation, and I have a length. But the topic here was for LLM prompting. GPT-4 Turbo says, okay, diving into the world of large language models. That's AI speak for sure. And it gives me some interesting, data with respect to LLM prompting. And Claude 3 Opus says, did you know that LLM prompting is a technique that allows humans to guide and control the output of large language models? No, I didn't. That's news to me. But it gives me key subtopics. Now,
really quick, Andy, before you move on from here, I just wanted to emphasize something. I saw Beth nodding her head too. So I know we're both on the same page with this, but how important what you just said. I know we're going to dive more into the workflows and stuff, but you talked about, looking to see if a newer model or perhaps an older model is more cost effective. And I think oftentimes people feel like it's a race to the top, but really, if you think about it, it's inverted. When you're looking at evaluations and side-by-side comparisons, what you're really doing is racing down. You're racing to the bottom. And by what I mean by that is you're racing to see what is the most bare bones, fastest, most efficient, most cost-effective model I can use to get consistent results where I'm totally fine with it. Because not every solution needs an opus. Not every solution needs a 4.0. And so it's really, I love what you said, but I just wanted to call it out and just really emphasize that so much of evaluations when you're getting to these enterprise or even mid-market size solutions like you would be building with Vellum, that's really a lot of it is, hey, how can I find the cheapest model that still gives me the very best results? And if I can get some efficiencies and speed, all the better for that as well. So yeah, there's always going to be new models. That doesn't necessarily mean new models are the right way to go.
Right. And so I can clearly see that these two models do a very different thing with the very same prompt. These are identical prompts. And so I might prefer one over the other, and that's a human evaluation. But Vellum offers a whole suite of metric evaluations, and I'm not even going to try to describe them, but I have a list on some notes here of all the various technical evaluations that are primarily designed to ensure that the output of those results is free of hallucinations and is actually meeting the requirements to match the semantic requirements of the prompt. So really, I'm going to just open up a workflow now. I jumped over to workflows and just show you that, this is a beautiful drag and drop interface that lets you add different elements to this flow and create the guts and the working process actions of an application that's using the prompts that you just tested and decided to deploy to production in one of these nodes. So one of these nodes would be an LLM node that's using the selected model. And if I go back into prompts and change the model, then I don't have to change the workflow. It just automatically updates it to using a different model. So I'm going to stop sharing there now. And I think that gives you an idea, but I'm open to questions.
I think it was excellently done, well prepared as always, Andy. Thank you for doing that. Like I think as far as questions for me, what I really love about it is the visual simplicity to it. Obviously, it's very complex, but one of the things a lot of these tools, not just Vellum, but Respells and others, I think does a fantastic job with it, where it's not even just static like we see there. That's a very DOS looking sort of basic. You don't need more than that. It's back end. But then you'll see a lot of these tools where they're expecting you to show maybe a workflow to the end user or to the people who are paying you if you're doing consultant work and stuff. And so you're even starting to see a little bit more like the bubble pops, or, Make does a good job of this, where two things get close to each other. Click used to do the same thing. If two things get close together, they go like bloop, and they attach to each other. And you think, well, what does that mean? Well, if you're an engineer, you're on the backside, it means nothing. It's totally there for the visual, but it goes a really long way, especially when you're working with somebody. Now, let's just remember, for Vellum, one of their case studies is with a company called Rentgrata. I always want to say like Rentegra, but anyway, Rentgrata is one of their case studies. And they were building an app called Ari that they wanted to use to bring in data and surveys and stuff like that from people who are renting. So they used Vellum as their tool for that. So you got to imagine, it's going to be important as both Rentgrata is building internally using Vellum. It's going to be valuable for them to be able to show their seniority, whatever, whoever's greenlighting the project, to say, look, visually, this is what we're building out. This is the section we're working right now. Look, I can zoom in here. I can back out there. We can dive in over to this section over here. I can show you where our roadblocks, where we're making progress and stuff like that. It's just so valuable, not only for the person building it to have a visual representation, but really all right up the chain as well. And so I think it's really, I don't know. Not so much a question as I just think it's super valuable to have these visualizations the way they do. I think over time, they're going to get even better.
So one of the things that we've talked about in the past is talking about these tools as kind of a Lego set, right? So that you can put different pieces together, or maybe, I don't know, magnetic trains might be a better option with your zoom and
nice.
Connect. And there is a range between what looks like an actual Lego, right? Or a metaphorical Lego. So you're not really seeing the code inside. You're just seeing the pretty picture of put this with this and something happens. This is on the other end of that spectrum. So you're really seeing the code, and the Lego part is just a tiny little line that goes between the blocks of data. And so just want to highlight that all of these are kind of that same Lego structure, but how deep you can go in the underside of the Lego and see the actual code and getting into that, really doing something with it. Vellum is actually giving you a lot of access in that, more than some of the other options.
And I was just gonna say, let's talk really quick about when a tool like this would be valuable to a company. Because I think, for our audience, they might be looking at Vellum and going, ooh, I have a project that might fit in there. But then there's always that, well, what's the price point, right? Do I need all the bells and whistles? Could I build this with a custom GPT? Here's the thing. This is just from my experience. I've actually, in the last week, just as it's happened, I've been in a lot of clients' offices or potential clients' offices. And so I've had a lot of fun conversations. And tools like IBM Watson X AI have come up, and there'll be some integrations there. Microsoft Copilot and what they're doing inside of 365 have come up. In the IBM Watson one, they have their own language model. When I listened to the Lex Fridman podcast with the CEO of Perplexity has their own trained model, but his answer was really important. I think it goes across all this, which was, do you want ultimately, Lexa, do you want people to ultimately use the Perplexity model? He said, we don't care. All we care about is the end user gets the knowledge and the experience they want to have, which is a great answer, which is, it doesn't matter to us if the Perplexity model gets you there, fantastic, but we're agnostic. We don't really care. It's more about the end user experience. But the reason I wanted to bring up these different tools, and like I said, for a business is, when does it make sense to move to a tool like this? It's not only enterprise. I mean, there's actually a lot of small business use cases where a tool like Vellum might make sense, especially obviously if you're like a company like Rengrata, who is, I told you I'd do it, who built that app Ari that they now want their end users to do. What I have found is that a tool that is more basic, like a custom GPT, can be a great MVP, can be a great proof of concept for an idea. So what's nice is that you have because you have less features and functionality. Although custom GPTs are great, we would say that it's a bit limited. I cannot, for instance, a custom GPT, move the creativity scale. I can do that in the playground, but I can't do that necessarily in a custom GPT. So it affects a little bit on how I tell it to go look at the documents and things like that.
Right.
So
it's also, you can't build a multi-model custom GPT, right? Like custom GPT is ChatGPT customized, which is OpenAI. And it's actually only the one model, right? It's 4.0.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. So what you lose, you gain, I feel like, in speed and efficiency and the ability to stand something up very, very quickly. I can sit in at a client's office and go, that's a really great idea. Let's go test it. Mm-hmm. And in the office, I can probably get to a point where I can go, well, let's look at some of the results here. Does this seem like if we kept moving in this direction, yes or no, could we get there? Now, if the business says to me, I like this, Brian, but because we're a Microsoft shop or whatever, we wouldn't build inside a custom GPT. That wouldn't be our solution. Now, as the consultant, as I might decide to go towards a tool like Vellum or others and say like, well, there's other ways to build this out. It really does just depend on what ultimately what the company is trying to get at the end. Are they the middleman? Are they like Rengrata, where they're building an app, but that app then has to be very, very good for their end user? Or are they internally using the app? And that obviously makes a difference too. There's a lot less on the line if only your internal employees are going to use this app that does this amazing thing. Because if it breaks, you go, hey, we're working on it. It's tough. AI is tough. Language models are tough. Sometimes they hallucinate even when it wants them to. That's a far cry from something that has to be McDonald's kiosk ordering food. And it needs to be right 99.99% of the time, as we just saw in one of the articles talking about that. It's a tough sell. So anyway, that's where my brain goes for this.
Yeah, really interesting. Jyunmi, you build most of our back end, like automation plus kind of thing. So it's not quite production. We're not selling it. It's not available to other clients, but it is more than just an automation, right?
Mhm.
I'm curious what you think about this orchestration question.
So I think in this particular case, as your business develops, and this is something that Brian's pointing out here, is you kind of have to identify at which level that you need to implement. All right. So this is all related to operations in general. Right. So if you start off with a custom GPT for your MVP or iterative, on a product or an idea, that's great. Get you started there. Then the next level is to identify how much of it you need to automate, right? Whatever your use case is, whether it's customer service enhancement, compliance, multi-vendor, interactions, these kind of things, building out an ETL. That's where the automation layer, I guess you would call it, or the automation section would come in. And this is where you would use Zapier, Make, and those other tools to make your life easier for your repeatable business tasks or your repeatable operations. I think where Vellum and model orchestration or orchestration comes in is that next level. Mm-hmm. When you need to organize and orchestrate all of your various operations, right? How do these operations that aren't necessarily connected to each other, creating a workflow so that all of those are working in tandem or in concert, as you will. And that's where I think Vellum, Respell, and those other kinds of tools really shine is, hey, we need to touch points with all of these different vendors and services that we have that have their own automations and their own environments. And we need to create an overarching workflow that makes it all work together. And that's where orchestration really shines, I think.
So to a certain extent, this is, but this is Mo versus Ho, right? Because a human orchestration is what we've been doing all the time in this. So we have been the orchestrator. And so now we're just sort of slightly moving it over to Mo, which is model orchestration. So to think of it, I'm starting to think of it in that context, right? So it doesn't have to be like it was this and now it's this. Like you're slowly moving from human orchestration to getting to a place where you're outsourcing or you're transitioning to more model orchestration. Yeah.
I just want to pull up Jen's comment because it took me as long as I think it took Jen to figure out what you just said. so Jen, what did she say? Not Mo versus Ho. I am screaming. Yeah. So yeah, thank you, Jen. I'm glad you responded to that as well. Also, by the way, before we move on, can I just pull this up? Jen says, Andy, I just think you're so freaking cool, man. I love the way you work through things, and I appreciate you sharing your expertise and findings. We all think Andy is very
cool. Thank you.
So, yeah, we all feel very, very lucky that we have.
I'm here to share and serve.
We're lucky. The Mo versus Ho totally got me off track there, Beth. But
well, let me make one quick point, which is I wanted to go back to the idea, like when you introduce a product in a workflow product with access to multiple models like this, it's easy to see how in a simple case, you can pick a different model to reduce your costs. But you could also find that there are 5 different models involved in a single workflow, right? Mm-hmm. Why might you do that? Well, maybe because you have a single API key to one provider, and you may want to have them spin off in parallel so that you reduce the latency in your overall workflow process. Now, many processes don't need to be real time that way, but conversational interactions with AIs and applications in your company will want to be very immediate. And so it might be to your advantage to be able to use an orchestration tool like Vellum to actually have multiple processes firing at the same time. And that parallelism is a really important aspect of what Vellum and other services do. Respell, I think, is, and presumably Cassidy as well can do those.
And look, that brings up you reminded me where I was going to go with it. Agents. Now, I know we talk about agents a lot on here, but just think about this. If you're listening to this show and you're like, wow, how do I future-proof myself in AI going forward? Okay, step one, let's just think about this. Watch the progression here. Step one, start writing prompts. Get in there, use the tools. Whatever tool you want to use, Claude you want to use, Meta you want to use, whatever it is, start writing prompts and understanding the kind of responses you get. That's step one, prompt engineering, right? 101 stuff. Then, hey, look, I found a pretty good prompt. I want to get that into a prompt library. I want to repeat and use that prompt over and over again. Great. That's a step two for sure. Start building that prompt library. Hey, you know what? I really kind of like this prompt. And not only do I like it, I think it'd be valuable maybe to other people, but I hate having to say what I do all the time or this information. If I could have that in like a RAG system, if I could have that in a retrieval, document, that would be great. Boom. Now we're at a custom GPT because now you can go off and look at that document. Now let's just keep going. Hey, I've gotten pretty good at this. I can write custom GPTs. I understand the general idea, but man, I'd really like to start dipping my toe into evaluations, workflows, these kind of things. Boom. Now we got tools like Respell and Vellum and others, or just Make if you want to go in there and build. And as Jyunmi says, watch the connections, watch two things run in parallel to each other and see what happens at the other end of that. Take one transcript from a show like this and turn it into 4 blogs, 2 emails and 7 social media posts and watch that process and maybe use 3 different models. Okay. Now, where is this going from here? Agents. So now let's take that 2D map of our workflow and let's turn it into a 3D. And now instead of just looking at a workflow here, this whole orb right here is an agent. And it's going to connect to this agent over here and maybe 5 others that are now all working collectively in tandem at different parts and picking up pieces because you've created Vellum expert agents, if you will, that handle one part of the whole workflow process really, really well. And that AI agent is part of the larger workflow. This is just where this is going. It's going to this part where there's still going to be a lot of human intervention, but these things are going to be running in the background and working through the process. So all the way from the basic prompt of help me do this, and then understanding that flow, all the way up to stuff that really isn't even out there yet. The agents and things like that we assume a tool like Vellum would move towards in the future as it becomes more available. It all starts though with getting good and getting understanding with the prompting so that you understand the process all the way through. And whether you want that to be your job or not, or you get excited like we do about these things, it's still going to help you in your job to understand the process, even if it's in your specific area of expertise, to deeply understand how AI moves through that process. To me, that's how you future-proof your job. If it's you and 20 other people, being the person that understands those AI workflows, it has a better chance.
Very good advice. And what you said, I really loved what you said about going from 2D to 3D, because we're talking about a 2D orchestration of multiple models, multiple component tasks, all being chained together in a series of, it's not just a single prompt chain, it's different processes intermingled with other things in that thing. That's orchestration. What you described is choreography. So now you've got a dance in the 3-dimensional space where agents are going to move around in ways that you didn't anticipate, right? These are kind of static. They're kind of stuck in the 2D environment, and they've got to produce an output and just send it on to the next one that you've chained it to. Well, now you get an agent with the agency, and now you've got a choreography layer that's required.
Perfect analogy.
And Justin just asked a great question, but before we get to it, I want to say that if any of you have ever played with Midjourney, or you've experienced sort of a low level of this. Midjourney is itself a generative generative
adversarial network.
Adversarial network. Thank you. I'm like angry. Generative angry network. But basically, it's 2 pieces saying they wanted a tree. Does it look like a tree? Not yet. Does it look like it now? Not yet. Does it look right? So it's going back and forth. That's a really basic agentic function between two models. And what we're talking about is much more elaborate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what was Justin asking about?
Justin is asking, are any platforms using a mix of models with a gatekeeper to automatically choose the best one for each query? It is a great question.
I think Claude is, right? Anthropic, because they have the ability to choose which model to run that'll be most efficient for your query.
OpenAI does.
Which are their models, they'll recommend their models. Yeah.
Exactly.
OpenAI does as well. If you have a basic chat open in OpenAI, they said several months ago that they may decide, you'll never know, but they may decide to use 3.5 to get the answer because they're trying to save money. Like if you think about it, like a free account, it's a free account. They're footing the bill for it. Since there's no ads or anything else, we can assume, somebody's paying for it, right? So it makes sense, obviously, that these models are going to figure out pretty quickly the most efficient for them.
Justin, I have a vague recollection of reading that product promise about some middleware that's working with multiple models. That it'll automatically figure out which one is optimized for whatever the attributes are that you want it to optimize for, including cost. I don't know which one it is, but I believe, because of that vague recollection, that I either invented that or you did.
No,
but I think it actually exists. Yeah.
And it's important to pay attention to as well if more products show up like that, because frontier models, they're going to be coming out. Tons of models will be coming out. All of the Hugging Face stuff. So having a layer in which that chooses which model is most ideal for your query, no matter who who it comes from, I think will be really important to implement into any overall workflow.
Yeah. By the way, that reminds me that it's really. Now I've lost my thought. Chance. Wow.
No worries.
That evaporated so quickly.
Still stuck on the generative angry model, which hey, listen, I'm just listen. None of these are bad terms, so when they come up, they should be instantly grabbed.
I remembered. So we've talked about a number of non-open source offerings, Respell, Cassidy, Vellum. There is a main orchestration tool out there for LLM development in the open source world that you've all heard of, and we've never played with, or I've never played with, and that's LangChain. LangChain is the open source system, and it's very prominently well known among engineers and developers because they tend to go to that rather than work in a proprietary system that's been offered by somebody at cost.
A little pushback. We did a show on LangFlow, which technically is a simplified version of LangChain, and we did a show maybe around episode 30. It was early.
Yeah, long ago. It seems to have dropped off the radar here, though.
But maybe it's time to bring it back, because LangChain is exactly what I thought of when you look at these flows. It's sort of like the OG in terms of that flow with it.
Yeah.
So just another sort of point to Justin's question. None of the major models that we're talking about are going to come out with that. There's no reason to, right? So that's not going to come from Anthropic or OpenAI or Google. It will likely come from Amazon, right? It may be something there. Could even come from Perplexity. But the people that I've talked to or that I've watched talk about this or gotten into those conversations with are developers themselves who want to do like, okay, I just need something that's going to test and tell me which direction I need to go in. But just also a slight pushback, just because you can does not mean you should. So if you have something working and like you could get 10% savings, but spend another 2 weeks trying to get it, that's something for you to evaluate. Like, this is giving you a ton of capability to do some things. From a dev standpoint, a again, just because you can doesn't mean you should. Really look at how much time it's going to take you and what the gain will be. If you're learning and playing, yay, the gain is amazing. But if you're in production and it looks like we can save a little bit of money here, but it might totally screw something up, that would be something to think about. And just look back on how often OpenAI has pushed things to production that we wish they wouldn't.
And by the way, getting good at telling stories is never a bad skill to have. Being a storyteller is always going to be positive. So if you're like, man, it's not really me. Hey, guess what? Take a snapshot of the Vellum workflow and then put it into ChatGPT or one of these other tools like Gemini and say, help me tell this story.
Yes.
You get better at telling stories of workflows, which, by the way, is what you're going to have to tell to the executives to get them to sign up on it. So get good at the stories and make sure you can connect the dots, because they're not deep into this. They're not loving this maybe the way we do. So you really have to be really good at connecting the dots and simplifying and making it very easy. And so, hey, use what you got. If you're not very good at that, use a tool like ChatGPT or any of the other ones who can look now at an image and use OCR and help you quickly come up with a plan or a strategy or a 5-slide deck that'll help you convey the story that you want that tells it along the way. So, all right. Any last comments here from the people? Thank you, Andrew, for joining us. I saw you joined us. Andrew saying Anthropic wooed me. Anthropic's been wooing me for well over a year, and I started using it in the app a year and a half ago, and I say this a lot, so I'm a broken record, but that is thanks to Rachel Woods, who had put out a TikTok about it and said, hey, the only way you can use this Claude guy, this bot, is in Poe at the time. And so, yeah, I'm with you, Andrew. Definitely. I'm glad more and more people are waking up to Claude and Anthropic, because it really is quite an amazing tool. There's setbacks such as browsing and internet and stuff that a lot of people need. I need for the stuff I'm building for our sales reps and people I'm building out solutions for, but it is a great tool. Okay, learn what I mentioned. Anything else, Beth? Do you see any other comments in there we want to hit before we wrap it up?
Shout out to all of our people watching us. Like and subscribe if you haven't. It really helps us out. And we have a newsletter. Go to thedailyAIshow.com and we'll see you tomorrow.
Yep, I was just working on the newsletter yesterday for Sunday, and I made myself laugh with the cartoon that I put into it. So, hey, there's always that. I'm making myself laugh when I put together the newsletter. So, all right, guys, we'll be back tomorrow. So come hang out with us again. Thank you again to everybody with all the comments. You guys are crushing it. Can I just tell you that our audience, Jen, you're the OG. Jen, you've been here since like almost day one with us. Holding it down in the comment section. And now we have so many other amazing people on there. Just echoing what you said, Beth. Thank you so much. It's so cool to see. All right, we'll wrap it up there. You guys have a great day, and we will see you tomorrow for another great AI discussion. Until then, guys, this has been the Daily AI Show. Bye.
Aloha.